All right, we're going to move right in, going to agenda item number 2. We're going to talk about the Northwest Louisiana Earthquake Cluster State Agency Assessment. I believe we have some invited guests, if you all want to take the table. So we have Keith Hall with LSU. You can take it 3 at a time. And then we also have Karen Luttrell from LSU. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you all have a seat and go ahead and identify yourselves for the record.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Keith Hall. I'm here from LSU. I'm the professor of law there and director of LSU's Energy Law Center.
Is that on? Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Luttrell. I'm a professor in the Department of Geology and Geophysics at LSU.
And I'm Laura Sori. I'm a geologist with the Department of Conservation and Energy.
And I'm Cynthia Ebinger. I'm a professor at Tulane University. I'm in the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department.
Okay. Okay. Well, my understanding is you will have some prepared remarks. Okay. Yes. You may proceed, ma'am.
Good morning, committee, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting us today. My name is Laura Sori, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Department of Conservation and Energy. I'm a licensed geologist with the C&E Office of Energy and previously served as the geology manager for our injection and mining division. Before joining the agency in 2019, I was a geologist in the oil and gas industry and in environmental consulting. I know you'll be hearing from a number of technical experts today, so I'd like to start off by talking about why these earthquakes are of interest to our agency. I'll then give a high-level overview of the seismic activity detected over the past few months, and then talk to you about C&E's 3 main priorities at this stage of the investigation. So why does this topic matter? While naturally occurring earthquakes can certainly happen in Louisiana, this extended series of relatively large magnitude events we've been seeing in northwest Louisiana is anomalous. And what's causing them? So let me clearly state that at this time, a definitive cause of these earthquakes has not yet been identified. Of course, there are concerns about the potential for induced seismicity, that is to say, earthquakes triggered by man-made activities, which in this instance means either hydraulic fracturing or wastewater injection, both of which are activities regulated by C&E and serve as the impetus for our involvement. I also want to note that C&E is not a research institution. We are the regulator, and while we have a number of highly experienced geologists and engineers, earthquake seismology is a very specific subspecialty with a subject matter expertise, which speaks more to the importance of collaborating with experienced researchers as we are currently doing. So we, as the regulator, have a couple of priorities when it comes to a case of anomalous seismicity like this. First is our regulatory obligation. What do we need to do to ensure that everybody is operating within their permit conditions? Second is the collection and sharing of information. What kind of data do we have access to by virtue as our role as regulator that we can share with subject matter experts at the USGS and other research institutions? And how have other states handled similar situations? Path forward. How can we ensure that future events are effectively characterized and that potential risks are mitigated or avoided entirely? Now, let's talk a little bit about the earthquakes themselves. As of today, the USGS Earthquake Catalog reports that 50 earthquakes of various magnitudes have been detected in Red River, Bienville, DeSoto, and Natchitoches parishes, with the majority of events being located in Red River Parish. This began with a magnitude 2.6 event on December 5th, 2025, and includes a magnitude 4.9 quake on March 5th, 2026 in Red River Parish. Some of the researchers speaking today will probably share about the work they've done to monitor and characterize this earthquake swarm, so I won't spend too long speaking on that point, as they can talk to those details much better than I can. I would just like to emphasize 3 main things that we have to bear in mind while this work is being done. First, lots of the data being reviewed as part of this work has some degree of uncertainty associated with it. But uncertainty isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's extremely common when you're dealing with any kind of geologic data. What matters is your ability to account for the uncertainty so that you can use that data intelligently. Second, site-specific data and adequate seismic monitoring are absolutely critical for understanding an earthquake and identifying its cause. At this time, Louisiana lacks adequate seismic monitoring across the state, which makes it extremely difficult to calculate the depth and geographic location of earthquakes. Our saving grace in this instance is the temporary seismic monitoring arrays that have been deployed in the northwest portion of the state by Tulane University and the USGS. Third is that there are few quick and easy answers when it comes to this type of work. Earthquake seismology requires highly advanced technical analysis that most geologists lack the training to complete. I don't say this to discourage hope that we'll be able to figure out an answer for the cause of these events, but to help you understand why we don't have a final answer yet. So, having talked about the earthquakes themselves a bit and some of the challenges we run into while trying to characterize them, what is the Department of Conservation and Energy doing about all of this? Earlier, I made reference to our 3 priorities: regulatory obligation, collection and sharing of information, and the path forward. So, as to regulatory obligation, we have inspected all Class 2 injection wells, and that includes enhanced oil recovery wells and commercial and non-commercial saltwater disposal wells within a 12-mile radius of the earthquakes to ensure that everybody is operating within their permit conditions. Our inspectors have found no violations during these inspections. We're also requiring all saltwater disposal well operators to submit daily injection info, such as well pressures, volumes, and rates to us on a monthly basis. Collection and sharing of information. We are working with researchers and subject matter experts at USGS, Tulane, LSU, the Louisiana Geological Survey, Texas Railroad Commission, Texas Bureau of Economic Geology, and other state geological surveys to better understand what's happening with these earthquakes and to hear lessons learned from similar earthquake investigations completed by other states. We're also sharing information related to fracking and injection operations with researchers so they can also incorporate that data into their technical assessments. Looking at the path forward, we're working with the LSU Center for Energy Studies and the Louisiana Geological Survey to assess the viability of a state-owned seismic monitoring network to provide seismic coverage. We're also evaluating whether future policy or regulatory changes may be warranted in order to mitigate future earthquake risk. While the work is ongoing and a number of questions still need to be answered, CNE remains committed to the protection of public safety and the responsible stewardship of our natural resources and will work with all stakeholders to ensure that any decisions or recommendations are underlain by data-driven conclusions. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
Thank you for that testimony. What I'd like to do, committee members, is go ahead and get all 3. And at this time, Mr. Hall, would you do me a favor? Go ahead and swap out with Dr. Ebinger, and then we'll bring you back up. I believe you have a presentation, don't you, sir?
Yes.
That we're going to load onto the screens?
Yes.
Okay, they'll give us time to do that. Okay.
She does do that.
Okay, good. We'll proceed across the table. Representative McCormick will get all the testimony, and then we'll ask questions. All right. Ms. Luttrell?
Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So thank you for inviting me to speak today. I know that.
I'm sorry, Ms. State your name for the record.
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. Yes. So my name is Karen Luttrell. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geology and Geophysics at Louisiana State University. I'm a solid earth geophysicist specializing in crustal deformation related to earthquake hazards. And so I know that this committee might not be accustomed to thinking about geological problems. So I wanted to spend a few moments making sure that everybody's on the same page about faults and earthquakes and how they work in Louisiana and beyond. For starters, oh yes, we can see the slide. Okay. So first things first, a fault, right, is a surface between two sections of crust. Most of the time, those two sections hold still relative to one another, but whenever the forces and stresses in the subsurface change, then faults can slip, meaning that the two sides move relative to one another. This is what causes an earthquake that generates the shaking that we feel on the surface and record with our seismic instruments. So this is a map of some of the major known faults in Louisiana. So each of these are faults that formed a long time ago when these sections of crust were part of a tectonic plate boundary. In general, across geologic history, everywhere on the planet used to be a plate boundary of some sort. So that means that the presence of faults is very, very common, even in Louisiana, where we're far away from current tectonic plate boundaries. The degree to which faults have been identified or mapped with precision varies widely based on essentially how many resources have been put towards it and how much motivation people have had to map faults. So these are some of the major ones. There are certainly more that are present. So if faults are sort of present very commonly in the subsurface, let's think about how do we know where to expect earthquakes. So this is the USGS National Seismic Hazard Model version 2023. This is the most recent version. This summarizes the most comprehensive understanding of earthquake hazard in the US. So if you look here, the red areas are very high hazard, right? Unsurprisingly, the highest hazard is centered on the active plate boundaries of the West Coast and the San Andreas Fault area. And if we add on that where the earthquakes are located, right, this is 1 year's worth of earthquakes, then you see that indeed most earthquakes are, of course, happening along those plate boundary regions. There are, however, a significant number of earthquakes that happen in the middle of the country. So in particular, can you guys see my mouse? No, not really. Okay. In particular, I would note those areas of increased activity in like Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. You can see those little clusters of gray dots there in those areas. Those are associated with a phenomenon that we call induced seismicity. So this is a phenomenon that we've seen more and more over the last few decades. And as you can see, it's actually been going on long enough in Oklahoma and in parts of Texas to now even be formally recognized in the seismic hazard models, as you can see by those like sort of elevated, brighter yellow colors near that gray swarm in Oklahoma, for example. Such. So let me give you a quick summary of how induced seismicity works. Let's see. Oh, there we go. There's this. So remember I told you that usually a fault is held steady by the pressure of the rocks above and around the fault, but the rock itself is made of both grains of sediment and tiny open spaces that we call pore spaces, which are often full of fluid. And whenever the fluid pressure in those pore spaces changes, then the stress state in the whole subsurface changes, and the earth will deform a little. It'll change shape in response to those forces. If there is a fault nearby, and there's almost always a fault nearby, then that can lead to sudden slip on the fault, which we experience as an earthquake, right? So we refer to earthquakes resulting from changes in fluid pressure from human activity as induced seismicity. So as you can see, this is very common in areas with high amounts of oil and gas production and high amounts of wastewater reinjection. Many of these earthquakes will go unnoticed by regular people living up here on the surface, but sometimes larger earthquakes can be felt and even cause damage or, in extreme cases, injury. So the key factor for understanding how extensive the impact of an earthquake will be is the magnitude. So here's what we mean by that. The earthquake magnitude is a single number that we use to describe how big the earthquake was. It is related to both the size of the patch of fault that slipped, so think about that like red rectangle area, right? How big of that, how much of the fault slipped, and it's also related to how far it slipped, so think about that like red arrow, right? And is ultimately related to how much energy was released. So you may know that the earthquake magnitude scale is logarithmic, meaning that a magnitude 4 earthquake is 10 times as big as a magnitude 3 earthquake, and a magnitude 5 earthquake is 100 times as big as a magnitude 3 earthquake. So when we get these larger earthquakes, the ones that we are feeling at the surface, these are related to a larger, more extensive section of fault slipping and or slip that has, where it has slipped a little bit further. All right, so I want you to understand that these phenomena, like the physics of these phenomena, including the occurrence of induced seismicity, is fairly well understood by the research community in terms of the physics and the mechanisms of how these things work. But each case, each individual case, has a lot of similarities, but also a lot of uniquenesses that Ms. Sori referenced. So in a particular instance, deciding what caused a particular earthquake requires both a lot of data and a significant amount of analysis. So that brings us to here. So this is the nationwide network of seismic stations that we use to monitor earthquakes and other phenomena at a national level. Again, unsurprisingly, you'll see there's a ton of those red triangles on the West Coast where we monitor the San Andreas Fault region. But you'll also notice there are some areas in Texas and Oklahoma, again, where there have been some intentional increases in seismic monitoring specifically for the purposes of monitoring induced seismicity. You will note that Louisiana there are just 3 stations listed there, and my understanding is that one of those is not currently operational, so there are currently 2 stations from the national network that are operating in Louisiana. And so if you'll forgive an analogy here, for induced seismicity operations, this is kind of like driving a car and like, if you imagine like the temperature gauge in your car, this is like having a temperature gauge where you can only see the red, right? We can right now only detect large earthquakes so that we're already having, that are already, very close to causing problems, right? So this is like only having a gauge that tells you when your car is already dangerously overheated. With the addition of stations such as our sister states have done, then that's sort of effectively like expanding your threshold of what you're able to measure so that hopefully you could be able to see when you are approaching having a situation of concern and then make choices to hopefully avoid having long-term consequences like having a damaging earthquake occur. And so I will leave my remarks there and leave it to my colleague to explain about what's been happening in Louisiana this year.
Real quick, Ms.
Yes, sir.
Luttrell, you said we can only detect larger earthquakes here in Louisiana. That's our detection capabilities at the moment. Because I know out west, I lived out west for a portion of time, they can
Yes.
detect, 1.5, 2.5, whatever it may be. So we're somewhat limited here in Louisiana, and probably because the occasion of earthquakes is fairly rare.
Right. So it has, these are the sorts of things we do not carpet the entire continent with instrumentation equally, right? So you're right. In areas that are really have a lot of intense seismic activity, like in California or Japan, then the joke is you can't walk around without tripping over a geophysical instrument. We have not thus far had an occasion to do that formally in Louisiana. Some of our sister states have decided that they needed to do that, as you saw that build out. So, but yeah, no,
Very
that has
good.
not happened in Louisiana.
And it's the recent cluster that's kind of why we're here to discuss this, try
Correct.
to get to the nub of what's going on. Thank you for that, Dr. Luttrell.
Yeah.
Dr. Eminger, would you please state your name for the record?
Hello, I'm Dr. Cynthia Ebinger. I'm from Tulane University. I'm a geophysicist, and I am going to show you the data that we've all been hearing about. And so we can look at some facts and hopefully put this all, with that context, start to understand what has been happening in the state. Great. Let me just, whoops, there we go. I have considerable experience over several decades working in plate boundary areas where earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and landslides are not uncommon. So I have not only worked to understand the processes, but also worked with communities in the aftermath of disasters. So what I have been doing in Northwest Louisiana is try to collect data that helps us make informed decisions. On March 5th, early in the morning, seismometers across the U.S., because the earthquake was large enough to be detected across the U.S. A seismometer in Shreveport deployed by the Arkansas Geological Survey detected the earthquake. That's the one at the bottom. The one at the top is Shreveport. The next one is in Carthage, Texas, and the other one is over near Timpson, Texas. But if you see that there was over a minute of intense shaking, so the wiggles that have kind of a bell shape, and they're in effect they're like a bell ringing with the same pitch over an extended period of time. That was shaking for about a minute. So this is what was felt in Northwest Louisiana. So ignore the top three traces. We don't need to go into that. Partly owing to social media posts and partly owing to just general information, people across Northwest Louisiana and eastern Texas went to the U.S. Geological Survey and entered information on a little survey saying what they experienced. And that enabled the U.S. Geological Survey to come up with a map of the intensity of ground shaking. So let me just explain a little bit. There are things like plates rattling. That's one level of shaking. If it's enough for the refrigerator door with a seal to bounce open and close again, that's a much stronger ground shaking, and these are just uniform things that we can use. So this is what respondents replied to, and this is the area impacted at 5:30 in the morning on a Thursday morning. If it had happened during the middle of the day, there might have been 10 times as many respondents. But you can see that the ground shaking was moderate to intense in areas very near to where the earthquake epicenter is. And you can see the star. That's the location of the earthquake at Earth's surface. But earthquakes occur below the surface, so that's just a representation. Okay. So up on the top, it's just another picture explaining how a magnitude 2 earthquake is 10 times smaller than a magnitude 3, and just showing with balloons how by the time we get to this magnitude 4.9, how much bigger it was than say a magnitude 3.9. So physics says that injection of any fluid into Earth's subsurface increases the pressure. If the pressure exceeds the strength of the rocks will break. If a patch of rocks break, it causes an earthquake. The larger the patch of rock that breaks, the larger the magnitude of the earthquake, the more earthquake shaking that occurs, the longer the duration of shaking, the more potential damage that can occur. So, when we see an increase in the number and magnitude of small earthquakes, little earthquakes mean there's an area of the ground that is susceptible and it's to be watched. But if an increase in number and magnitude, it means that the pressures are increasing. That is without a doubt a fact. So what I try to do is detect small earthquakes and say, these are areas where pressure is increasing. Let's pay attention to these areas, maybe perhaps modify our activities or at least prepare for a situation. Okay, so our ability to detect depends on the size of the earthquakes, their magnitude. So if it's very small, we need a lot of instruments close together. The USGS can only locate earthquakes in Louisiana with a magnitude greater than 2.5. But if I get research funding and put seismometers out, I can detect earthquakes of magnitude 0.5, magnitude less than 1. And I can start to see places where pressure is increasing. So what have I done? Well, in 2019 to 2021, I had a small array out in northwestern Louisiana. We had 14 stations out just to see what was happening in Louisiana, and we saw some areas with small earthquakes. We saw one near the Texas border and in the Coushatta area. And there were some others, but they were just like a single earthquake, nothing that we were so concerned about, and we reported to the state. Meanwhile, time's gone on, and I got additional funding as the number of earthquakes were reported by the U.S. Geological Survey started to increase. I got a small grant, and I put 7 seismometers out, and we have detected 116 earthquakes since last October, whereas the U.S. Geological Survey has only detected about 50. So we've doubled the number, and we're able to see areas where the pressure is increasing. Now, that timeline that you can see up there, the number and magnitude of earthquakes, magnitude isn't shown, but the number has very definitely increased since 2021, and 100 earthquakes that should be since, it shouldn't be November, it should be December. Sorry, that was an edit mistake. Just to say that my work so far has shown that the depths reported by the U.S. Geological Survey are the same as what we're determining. Now, in March, we had our first earthquake, and I just want to explain one more thing. We talk about a main shock, and then there are adjustment earthquakes that happen afterward, but they are generally an order of magnitude, meaning if there's a 4.9, we'd expect aftershocks to be 3.5, 3.7. But instead, 3 days later, there was a 3.1, 3.2, 4.1, 4.4 that's almost as large as the first earthquake. That type of earthquake pattern is more like a swarm. We see those on volcanoes where we have pressurized fluids in the subsurface, and we have seen them in other areas where there is wastewater injection or fracking occurring where fluids in the subsurface may be involved. I'm not saying we can prove that. I'm showing you some data and giving you an indication of some of the additional research that can be done to help answer questions. Okay, so you want to know what we found. In red are earthquakes detected by the U.S. Geological Survey between 2022 and 2025. In blue are 2019 to 2022, when we first started to see earthquakes in Louisiana. You can see that the blue, the red, and the green are what I've been recording since October, the end of October. In black are known faults in the Louisiana Geological Survey database. Yet, if you look at Coushatta, there's a northeast striking fault that's well known by operators, by geologists and others in the subsurface that isn't on that map. There's probably another one up by Ringgold where you see another cluster of earthquakes. The earthquakes up at the Texas border, those are along known faults, and they make sense. And the box is the piece where I am pointing out, this is new information on the number of earthquakes along that fault system in the Pelican area of south of Coushatta on a different fault. And those are small earthquakes right now, but there are a lot of them. Okay, so I'm going to blow up. Oh, sorry, this is I just wanted to say, too, that the instrumentation that's out after the March earthquake, because I had instruments out, I went out to help the U.S. Geological Survey. They also telemetered some of my stations, so it's going directly to the U.S. Geological Survey to assist in rapid rapid location. And this is just the team that's out giving you an idea of the size and the scale of the instruments. That kind of triangular thing in black, that's the cell phone telemetry system. This is probably the blow-up you want to see. There's Coushatta, the earlier earthquakes in blue from 2019, the swarm in 2021, then 2022 to 2024. The green are what happened in March, and then the green are the second. It's this other group of earthquakes that hadn't been reported before that you are seeing, you're seeing for the first time. And then they're shown over on a map on the left on a Google Earth map, so you can start to place them in terms of geographic markers that you might be more familiar with. And you can see the Red River coming down with the wiggles there, and it's coming, Nakadich is just off the map to the right-hand side. I think that's all, just to say that there are areas in Louisiana in this reclaimed coal mine area where the soil's weak, the ground is weak, and there was damage. So earthquakes can happen and can cause, this earthquake did cause local damage and some timberland. So I just wanted to raise your awareness of the potential in Northwest Louisiana. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ebinger. The sensors that you put up when you received the grant, and you put some sensors out, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. And they were able to detect 0.5 and higher?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Are those reported to the USGS? Just curious.
So the U.S. Geological Survey, it's a typical situation. Tulane University owns the seismometers that I use for research experiments. They were part of my startup research package. So I got funding to deploy them, and as in terms of the agreement, there weren't really funds available. It was a small grant that didn't cover the cost of telemetry, and nor does the U.S. Geological Survey normally process information from local arrays. So scientists do their research, they report their findings, the data is archived with the U.S. Geological Survey, but we don't normally add into it. It's a lot of extra work for them.
Yeah, it's not an immediate reporting as it is for the larger, was it 2.5, Dr. Luttrell? Mm-hmm. They have sensors for that, which is automatic reporting, whereas your smaller sensors aren't doing that. You're basically collecting data and passing it along?
Well, I think the smaller sensor, it's not the size of the sensors, it's the spacing between them. So the closer they are, the smaller the earthquake. The U.S. Geological Survey is operating 2 seismometers in the state. Without Texas and Arkansas having denser arrays, they wouldn't even be able to locate magnitude 2.5.
So it's the density of
the density of the stations. So
the ability to monitor is the same. It's the density which detects the smaller magnitude.
So I would add.
Hold on. There you go. Dr. Luttrell.
Yeah, sorry. So if I can add, and the difference is that the USGS operated stations are automatically plugged into their workflow, right? So that's why they can report earthquakes in near real time, right? As opposed to the sort of academic networks, even once the data is telemetered, it's still, it's sort of a scientific expertise workflow issue and such. And so those are not automatically plugged into sort of long-term, national level operations, although in some cases they, end up becoming that way if these things end up becoming permanent. But that's not a standard thing that would automatically happen.
I'm going to let some of the members ask a few questions. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate y'all being here today. I do have some quick questions, kind of a little background on me. I've been in the oil and gas business my whole life. Was in the drilling business. We drilled shallow wells. We've drilled thousands of wells and hundreds of thousands of feet, and it's really neat, all the things you encounter when you're drilling. I have to tell you one day about the cypress trees we've drilled in before, got to the top of the ground, but that's on another point. We talked about saltwater injection, and that's where my main questions are, because that's where my experience are. In Red River Parish, for instance, the deepest depth of the saltwater injection well in that area?
I don't know what the deepest active injector is, no, sir.
It was my understanding in natural resource, we didn't give it an exact depth. We thought like 6,000 or 7,000 feet was the deepest depth of injection well in that area. And it's, in my understanding is these earthquakes, the shallowest I've seen, if, based on y'all's testimony, I don't know if you can tell, but was about 3 miles deep. Does that sound correct?
I can answer that question right now. So the initial reports from the U.S. Geological Survey were based on stations far away. And if you think about this, there are earthquakes here, there are seismic waves that are traveling like this. And there wasn't anything going straight up and down. So that means that the complexity of the Earth was leading to large uncertainties. They really didn't know the depth of the earthquake. And they didn't know the depths of the earthquakes until we put the additional instruments out. Now, for the Sunday, the morning, the 9th of March, we'd had 2 instruments that were almost directly on top of the earthquakes. All of a sudden, we had a station that was able to very accurately say the depth moved up. Everything moved up. Okay, so there are a few earthquakes at about 5 to 6 kilometers subsurface, but the vast majority of earthquakes are between about 2 and 4 kilometers depth. So
Can you change that into miles for me? Or feet?
Well, sorry, they're in the Sligo. They could correspond to the Sligo-Hostin formation that's used for wastewater injection. Okay, so I think that would be, and these have uncertainties. So I'm saying to you that if I say between 2 and 5, that's plus or minus a kilometer or so. And so we're in this area where we're testing all these uncertainties. So I cannot tell you the precise depth. I can tell you that the earlier reports were too deep. And they have been changed, and they are considerably shallower than what they were. And no one wants to know the depths more than I do, and I am working hard to do that. But it's time-consuming and requires extensive testing that I have not done.
And that makes sense. I appreciate that, because I didn't see, from I guess 5 kilometers is 3 miles. So I guess 2.5 kilometers would be 1.5 miles. So, but that's still considerably deep. I think deeper of any injection that I know of. But it sounds like the whole issue, being in the oil and gas business and being and concerned about the future of the wells and about injection wells and different things. It sounds like to me what y'all need is a better monitoring process, and we can figure out what the issue is and then solve the problem. So you're not just, we're basically now we're guessing on a half a dozen things, and we don't know what that is. It could be natural. I know up in northwest Louisiana is where I live, next to Kettle Lake. One of the theories is the Kettle Lake was formed from an earthquake. And in that area, I'm very familiar with the Morningsport area where some of the earthquakes were. There's no deep fracking in that area. There's no deep injection. That everything's very shallow, very low pressure. So, I guess I would like to see the getting the information get together so we can answer the question and then see what the problem is and go from there. So I appreciate y'all being here today. Anything else y'all want to add to any questions that I had?
Can I just add, you're saying, it's music to my ears to hear that acquiring more data and having having the information to take informed decisions. I have funding to keep instruments out for about another 12 to 14 months. So it's a temporary funding arrangement for this grant, and they're not permanent.
Where's that funding coming from?
It's a small grant from the U.S. Geological Survey.
Okay.
And it's a research grant.
Do you see any other funding sources out there that you're working on now?
For me as a research scientist, no, because that would be, monitoring is something that is not really considered research. It's something that an agency or someone else should be doing. So that's
Okay.
not, I think you can see the dilemma that we're facing.
Which is probably a perfect time for me to jump in. Yes, no, Dr. Ebinger, I think, speaks to a really important point. I think you referenced it yourself. This need for additional monitoring so that we can actually characterize what's going on and then can make decisions based on that reliable data. And that is the reason that we're currently working with LSU on putting together a potential proposal, or rather a potential seismic monitoring plan for what a monitoring network could look like, what it would need to entail, and how we could use that going forward, so that we see, is that a viable solution for Louisiana for us to develop?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here, ladies. A couple of things. So for the committee to be aware of and for all listening, between 2019 and 2022, Tulane, LSU, and the University of Louisiana did some research on their own volition. It was not funded by the state. It was research funded, right? There was some help.
It was funded by Department of Energy and Natural Resources.
Okay, well, good to know. I don't think we've done anything with it, though. I've looked at it. It was delivered back to the state in 2022, recommending what we're talking about right now. And so we kind of have a template in place. Dr. Ebinger was involved, and good folks at UL and at LSU were involved. So I think we have a template that we should be looking at. Are you aware of the report? Have you seen it?
I am, yes. You're referring to the ISIL report?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so that is part of the information that we're looking at during this process. I can't speak as to what or was not done at that time. I'm not familiar with those exact details, but I know that we are looking at any and all information available to us to put together any potential recommendations moving forward.
Sometimes in life you whistle by the grave, and nothing catastrophic has happened. This is kind of a startling moment, or we wouldn't be having this meeting. It's not happened in Louisiana, so this is really good time to pay attention to it while we get we used to call in the military a tactical warning, maybe a strategic warning, but we got a little bit of a warning here. This is something for y'all to pay attention and to pass along to the legislature if funding is needed. This is a public safety issue as much as anything else, which is the reason we really wanted to have this meeting. And I will have some questions for GOSEF about response on this topic when they come up. It's not GOSEF's meeting, not their component of the meeting, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to ask what the lessons they learned in this. Because when all this happened, I asked Secretary Davidson, I said, so what did the department do as a result of this? And he said, well, nothing. That's not our lane in the road. And so we may need as a state to recalibrate what our lanes in the road are and who does what to whom. And it's kind of embarrassing that we had to borrow data from Arkansas and Texas to find out what happened here. We really should be better than that. But, we have a chance to be. And I want to thank you all for being here. Dr. Ebinger, the slide you put up that had the locations where shaking had been felt. I saw some down as far as central Louisiana.
Alexandria, yeah.
Yes, okay. So it was felt that far?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious. I saw where I live was included in that. So very interesting. Thank you all very much. These are good leave behind materials that we as a committee and we as a legislature need to watch and to digest, and certainly some things for the for the Committee on Natural Resources to pay attention to going forward. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Representative Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions over a range of subjects. One is, I thought Representative McCormick was going to hit it, but as I understand it, disposal pressures are significantly higher in Texas than they are in Louisiana. So I was wondering if they're seeing similar activity in East Texas as we've seen seismically.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to that based on my conversations with the Texas Railroad Commission, who is the regulator for Class II injection wells and oil and gas activity in Louisiana. They have observed a number of earthquakes that they can either attribute to or believe are likely attributed to saltwater injection activity. They have also found earthquakes that they believe are potentially due to hydraulic fracturing, though it's my understanding that the induced seismicity as a result, or thought to be a result of wastewater injection, is a much higher occurrence than that associated with hydraulic fracturing. So I don't have all the details of the Texas response to that in front of me, but I'm happy to send you some additional information on when they started observing that seismicity and what some of their regulatory and policy responses were.
Well, I'm kind of wondering, do they see a higher frequency or magnitude because their pressures are higher than ours? Is there anything in the data to indicate that?
I don't know if that is, I don't know if they were able to draw that specific conclusion.
Okay. I also wanted to know, you're looking for more data. I know you'd like to just listen for the earthquakes, but do we have any kind of partnership or agreement with the exploration where they're doing seismic shots to where we can figure out from their data where these fault lines, because y'all mentioned you suspect some are here or there. Do we have some kind of data cross-feed with them to where we can see what they're getting data-wise?
No, sir. Right now, we don't have any formal agreement. As part of the saltwater injection well application process for a non-commercial well, generally, operators are not required to provide extensive geologic mapping of the area of review, or that is, say, the geographic area that could be potentially impacted by the injection project. However, our commercial disposal operators, that is, say, operators who are accepting wastewater that's been produced by other oil and gas operators, they do have some higher requirements or some more stringent requirements for geologic characterization. So we do get some info on potential faulting or the mapping of the area in those instances, but as a whole, we don't have a larger agreement or requirement for oil and gas operators to submit seismic info associated with wastewater injection wells.
Now, would you say that's primarily because of trade secrets? They really don't want to reveal that, and they're hesitant to release that to the state, or is that just a paperwork nightmare for them, or what would you say the biggest obstacle to getting some kind of shared data in that realm might be?
I can't really speculate as to the company's motivations on that. I will say it is not a regulatory requirement, and in my experience, the operators generally are not going to share information that we don't explicitly request.
Okay.
And if we don't have regulatory authority to request something, yeah.
Okay. In another area, I was thinking if the magnitude and frequencies of these are increasing, is there something in our building codes, or do y'all talk with them about how we should be designing roads and bridges and homes and whatnot to account for increased or magnitude or frequency? Do y'all have any collaboration with?
I'd add one more piece to this to say that this is something, it doesn't necessarily keep me awake at night, but it bothers me that the fault in Coushatta ruptured most likely under the Red River, meaning that it ruptured under the levees to the Red River. And those are soft earthen structures that are susceptible to shaking, right? So it's what structures do we have, what are our building codes, and I don't know. It's well outside my field to know what the building codes are, but I am aware of the material properties of the surface, the mined area, the reclaimed land, and the levees are the softest pieces out there, and those are my biggest concerns right now.
So we need to be thinking about that, okay. And lastly, I'm thinking about how we've thought things over time and been challenged on the validity of our assumptions. And I want to make sure we're careful not to jump right in and say this is the fault of exploration and production or whatever, when it could just be, we've got more monitoring, more people reporting. I don't know. I just want to make sure we don't jump to some conclusion and go off the wrong way there. So I just encourage you to have an open mind, as well as we do, to make sure that we don't say, oh, this is the reason for all this right here. Let's just stop it or restrict it or whatever. And I'm wondering how far our data goes back. Is this just the earth moving as normal processes, or are we exacerbating the problem? And I don't want to jump one way or the other, so.
And if I may respond to that, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that has, formed sort of the core of the agency's response, is we want to make sure that we're gathering all the information we can and that we're sharing it with researchers like Dr. Luttrell and Dr. Ebinger, so that, any assumptions or any evaluations that are made with data and aren't just being driven by a knee-jerk response.
Okay, well, thank you again, appreciate it.
And just to piggyback on what Representative Cruz said, is that is important, because we are an oil and gas state, and we're all proponents of it. We want to make sure that we're doing everything properly, and everyone else is safe in the process as we do that. We're going to go now to Representative Amade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I just want you to know that looking at pictures like this brings me right back to 5th grade, and I love it. It also shows me that in my House district, there are apparently 3 of the major fault lines here. So I represent portions of Terrebonne, Lafourche, Assumption, and St. Mary, so I'm very far from the area where we're focusing because of the recent activity. But I know that we're also not immune down along the Gulf Coast. A lot of times when people talk about building roads, I remind them that everything south of I-10, it's like building on pudding. So we're going to have constant maintenance of our roads. But from your perspectives, tell me what I need to know about my area and what's below ground. Does that pudding keep us safe, or does that pudding put us at a greater risk for eventually something major moving?
I can say that our biggest issue right now is monitoring. So you are asking a question, and we don't have the data to fully answer your question. GPS measurements can tell us precise how, to millimeter scale, how the ground is moving over time. Or sub-centimeter, let me be a little more precise. But because the ground is also compacting, there isn't a stable surface in which to put that. So maybe we can put some instruments in some of these orphaned wells that are pinned all the way down towards 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers deep. But so we lack that data. We think from other information that it's creeping steadily and the stresses aren't building to earthquakes. So it's kind of happily moving without a lot of friction. And so it's not the case, but we don't know because we don't have enough data.
I would also dovetail that by saying you are talking about 2 very different geologic contexts. I like your description of that geology as pudding. I think that's very apt. Anyone who's ever drilled through that can attest to that. So when we are looking at the monitoring component, we're also looking at what's that geological context, what does the rock look like, what's the framework, because what is applicable in Northwest Louisiana may not always be directly applicable in Southwest Louisiana, or Southeast Louisiana, excuse me.
Right. Do we even have any bedrock? I mean, how far down is it?
That's a ways.
I don't know how deep. It's quite deep. I'm not familiar.
6 miles.
Yeah, about 6 miles, it sounds like.
Wow. Yeah, we are the Mississippi Delta for sure, so lots of layers of sediment. So 6 miles, okay. Would you like to add anything, Ms. Luttrell?
I think the main thing that I would add is that, in addition to the, we have to have data in order to be able to answer these questions, but as Representative Cruz was alluding to, there's also an analysis step, because, once you have the information, it actually takes a fair amount of expertise to then, once you have the information, to then ask the questions about, what's related, what's causing what, how much is it happening? Is it happening an anomalous amount, or is it happening a regular amount? Those are analysis questions. So, putting out widgets is the beginning of a solution to being able to tell what's happening, but there's sort of another piece after that, which is important to be able to answer those questions, I guess.
Okay, and just my last point, when I held this up and mentioned fifth grade science, I in no way was saying that this is elementary. It's just that this looks a lot like a science project that I turned in that year, so that's why.
That is a figure from a textbook that I use for LSU freshmen, so.
Great.
Right in
Okay,
line.
thank you, ladies. That's all for now, Mr. Chair.
All right, members, we have 2 more agenda items, and we have to get on the floor at 1 o'clock, so I don't want this to get out of control. I'm going to give Representative McCormick one more bite at the apple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want a follow-up question. I think it's important that Representative Cruz asked. He was talking about the injection pressures in East Texas. Now, it's my understanding that Texas has some earthquakes associated with water injection, but not necessarily in East Texas. It's in South Texas and West Texas. I think that's what the diagram showed. Is that correct? I assume you were talking about Texas in general, not East Texas.
I would say they have had earthquakes in East Texas as well.
Okay. Looking on the diagram, it looked like in South Texas and West Texas is water high.
In 2012, Timpson, Texas had a 4.8, the largest earthquake ever in the state of Texas. And that was in 4 different publications, and in the Railroad Commission was wastewater injection.
Where's that at?
Timpson is just west of the Sabine Reservoir. Yeah.
How far from the state line is it? Guess.
A few miles.
30 miles, 20
Okay.
miles. Yeah.
All right.
Very close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to
Yep.
verify that. Thank you.
Very good. Dr. Ebinger, did you fill out a white card? Would you before you leave? What I'd like to do now is bring up Professor Hall and then the Director of GOSEP just to maybe respond to Representative Owen, just where GOSEP stands on earthquakes, what their current responsibility is in relation to that. So, gentlemen, please introduce yourself for the record. General Malfus, did you fill out a white card?
I did.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Professor Hall, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Keith Hall, I'm from Louisiana State University Law School. And, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for the invitation. I thought what I could add is kind of a high-level overview of what some other states have done in response to incidences of suspected induced seismicity. And I started following this about 11 years ago. This was getting a lot of activity when Oklahoma.
Professor Hall, I'm sorry. Let me call it audible here. That way, General Malfus doesn't have to sit at the table unnecessarily. Just a quick, because Representative Owen, Vice Chair Owen was wondering where GOSEP is and what the response is when they receive a notification that there's an earthquake.
I understand. For the record, Brigadier General Jason Malfus, Director of GOSEP. With respect to Representative Owen's question about impacts on GOSEP, the impacts have been minimal. We're a consequence management agency by and large. We tend to focus on the things that require the application of resources. Up to this point, beyond notification to key members and recording it on our COP, on our Common Operating Picture in the SEOC and the State Emergency Operations Center, there's been no impact on GOSEP. If this gets to the point where the governor would declare a state of emergency, and we were going to apply additional resources from the state, that would likely be through GOSEP's emergency contracting apparatus, but at this point, he hasn't chosen to do that, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, for being with us. The curiosity I have is tied to okay, this is kind of a first in a long time or a first ever, and so we're excellent at dealing with disasters here. That's kind of one of our best skill sets. And so y'all already have the muscle movements in place to deal with disasters, but this one could be different. And so I will assume y'all are doing your due diligence to say, okay, doing your tabletops or whatever that you might do to say if this goes down this path or how has it happened in other places. That was just me thinking out loud.
Oh, no, sir. So to your point, GOSEP has participated in the New Madrid and the Cascadia, but, because it occurs in our region. So Arkansas has a tabletop exercise annually on the New Madrid and Cascadia faults, which would, if it was a catastrophic failure of that fault, would have a regional response requirement from across all emergency support functions. So we do have a regular routine, but it's not focused on the state of Louisiana. It's focused on how we would EMAC forces in support of other state seismic activity.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just a quick follow-up, General Mahfouz. Was a web EOC incident generated for any of these? Did it rise to that?
No, sir. It was, as I've noted to you in traffic between you and Senator Klein Peter, we make note of them when they reach that reporting level of 2.5. We have backed off and we're essentially reporting them all now just because we understand there's a curiosity and a need to have information in a timely manner. So when they're reported to us, now I wasn't tracking the scale and the number, exceeding 50. I was tracking up to what U.S. Geological Survey has reported up to this point in the year, but not any beyond that. Anything below the 2.5, we don't get notification of.
Are we recording any of these incidences? Because I know there was some traffic between you and I and Senator Klein Peter, my counterpart on the Senate side. Is there any formal recording of these incidences currently?
We do put them into our common operating picture, which is, it's logged. So every time we post something on the common operating picture, an incident of seismic activity is logged on the common operating picture. Not necessarily in WebAOC because there's no requirements.
Understood.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, General.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hall, for allowing us to call it a little bit audible. Go ahead, sir. Proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so we got a handout that I understand you have. And there are some other states that have had a lot of experience with what they suspect is induced seismicity. And this started getting a lot of attention about 11 or 12 years ago when Oklahoma, which traditionally has more seismic activity than Louisiana, saw a very dramatic increase in the number of level 3 earthquakes, going from an average of about 1 to 2 a year to going up to several hundred per year. And at the same time, as was discussed earlier, Kansas was also seeing a significant increase, but not quite as much as Oklahoma. And so what did various states do in response to the suspected induced seismicity? One thing some states did is start to consider the risk of induced seismicity in the injection well permitting process, where typically the main concern of that permitting has been the protection of underground sources of drinking water, but they started looking at also a risk of seismicity. They began requiring more monitoring, sometimes with funding networks, sometimes with requiring operators to do seismic monitoring. And I think that's something that the earlier testimony indicated might be helpful in diagnosing problems. They also began requiring more frequent reporting of injection volumes and pressures instead of once a year, perhaps monthly or even daily, so that the regulator would have more, times, more data as far as when injections were actually occurring. Where they were seeing particular problems, sometimes they had moratoria on injections or mandated reductions in the volume of injecting. And another thing that some states have done is implement what they call a traffic light system, where it's a system of graduated sets numbers of earthquakes or magnitudes of earthquakes. That if they see them, they will start to go to measured responses. For example, when there's no indication of induced seismic events. They'll be in the green light situation where there will be, of course, the whatever permit conditions are there to protect underground sources of drinking water, but no additional restrictions relating to fears of prompting earthquakes. But then if they begin to see some earthquakes above a certain frequency of earthquakes or above a certain magnitude, they may go to what they call a yellow light situation where they'll require more frequent monitoring and perhaps some reductions in injection volumes and pressures. And then if they get even more earthquakes as far as frequency or of even greater magnitude, they get to what they call the red light situation where they may require a cessation of injections until the earthquake activity subsides. And then I just have examples for reference of what some of the specific regulations in other states are. For Oklahoma, which saw the greatest number, had some moratoria, but they also required increased monitoring and reporting, particularly for the Arbuckle Formation, a deep formation that they thought was the location of some of the earthquakes. Texas is one of the states that began requiring data on past seismic events in the permitting process to try to consider that when they're considering granting an injection permit. Ohio implemented a system where they could demand more information when they saw earthquakes within a few miles of the injection site. And then Illinois is one of the states that explicitly referred to their system as a traffic light system, where if they started seeing earthquakes above a certain level, they would say we're now in a yellow light situation and require stricter regulations, and then eventually, if you got to even more earthquakes, a red light condition. And so I wanted to just briefly give you a high-level overview of what some other states have done, and I think some of the demand for increased monitoring and reporting is consistent with what some of the technical experts suggested would be helpful for them in diagnosing actually what is going on. But other than that quick presentation, I'm happy to try to answer any questions and just be a resource going forward.
Is it Professor Hall? Is that accurate? Yeah, Professor Hall, thank you for that presentation. Do you know how Louisiana compares to the other states? Do we have significantly less monitoring and the system that you described compared to the other states?
I guess we have the monitoring of what's going on with the injections themselves, and then with the seismic activity. As you heard earlier, it certainly is my impression that on actually monitoring earthquakes, that because we haven't had a lot of earthquake activity in the past, we have a lot fewer seismographs, and therefore the greater the density of rage, the more seismographs you have out, the easier it is to detect the earthquakes, because it's a function of how close is the earthquake to the seismograph. So I think we have a lot less than some other states on that. On the monitoring of what's going on with the injections,
regulation-wise is what I'm talking about.
Right. I think Ms. Sori would be probably the better source on that. I think some of the other states, though, have required more frequent reporting of the injection volumes and pressures than Louisiana has, is my impression.
Very good, because I want to try to move this along. We have a couple of more agenda items that I'd like to get to. We're going to go to Representative Amade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Professor, for the page with your traffic light system. It just leads me to wonder what frequency, what magnitude, who decides, and is there a chart?
I could provide that. Those are in the regulations, and trying to keep it where it wasn't too dense, I didn't include that, and I don't recall, but it relates to both the magnitude of the earthquake and the number of earthquakes, but I don't recall what particular numbers trigger yellow light versus green light, and it also varies from one state to another amongst the ones that have a traffic light system.
Okay, so that answers my question, that there's not one set standard nationwide. This varies from state to state. And who decides that in each state?
That would be the regulator if they're given statutory authority, and then take that step.
Okay, and my last question is, the two, well, the chart and I guess they're both charts that you shared with us from Oklahoma and Kansas, those are significant increases. So do we know that those increases are from induced seismicity?
The geologists are, the technical experts. My understanding that the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and the Kansas Corporation Commission, as well as most scientists, concluded that most of those were, the increase was the result of induced seismicity, and that was based on the location of the earthquakes relative to some of the injection wells.
Okay, and the charts that you shared, one goes up to 2016 and the other 2015. Has that trend continued? Has it skyrocketed or has it leveled off?
It's gone down significantly. I included those as kind of an illustration of what caught people's attention in the regulatory community. It's gone down significantly in both of those states. And the numbers are out there, but on the current numbers, it's down significantly.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Representative Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Similar question. So you're saying with this traffic light system, they've seen seismic activity go down when they institute these changes?
Yes, Oklahoma and Kansas have both seen a significantly reduced seismicity in response to, they believe in response to their regulatory steps, which include the traffic light system and to some extent restricting the injections, as I understand it, into one of the basement rocks, the Arbuckle, what they think was particularly problematic.
Okay, and I did have a question, but I don't know if you're the right person to answer. I was just thinking about, we get a lot of changes in the water table, and I'm wondering if that can induce these types of seismic activity as well.
I'm probably not the best person. I did read a lot of the scientific papers like 10 years ago when I was first doing this, and it's my understanding that at large hydroelectric dams where you've built up a large height of water in a reservoir, that you sometimes have seen induced seismicity. So the weight of water is my impression, can have an effect.
Okay, I've just seen a lot of reports about these different aquifers and the strain they've been under lately, and just wondered if that contributed to this. So, thank you very much.
All right, the board is clear. I do have, thank you, Professor Hall, for that testimony. I do have 3 white cards present to provide information, not wishing to speak, is Greg Upton, Audrey Evans, and William Berger. I think at the end of the day, I think we're finding out is we probably do need more monitoring. That'll get us some better data and better information to make sure that as we carry on here in the state of Louisiana, engaging in exploration and extraction of oil and gas, that we're doing it safely and we're not harming the public. So with that, I thank you all for coming out. Thanks for your testimony. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second agenda item. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Bill Berger's card should have stated that he would like to speak.
Okay.
And I think
Is Mr. Berger here?
has an expertise.
Okay. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes.
And ma'am, have you filled out a white card?
No, I was just
Okay.
filling it out.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is William Berger. I'm a registered professional geoscientist from the state of Texas, and I'm here just to elaborate a little bit about what's going on in Texas. A couple comments first. I never thought I would witness a series of qualified representatives to be in a geologic course and lecture this morning, so that was pretty amazing. And in my 30-plus year career, I never thought I'd be here before you all talking about earthquakes in Louisiana. And yet, here we see that in Texas quite a bit. As we always say, everything is bigger in Texas, including our earthquakes, so there's a lot going on. We've been studying this for a few years now. I come from an oil and gas background, so I've been in oil and gas for 30 years. Actually worked with BP on the post-Macondo incident, so I know all about what happens when things go bad, but also what it looks like when we're looking at things in our local communities. A lot was said this morning, and let me just frame one thing. In the state of Texas alone, every day there is 20 million barrels of water being injected in the ground. That's enough every day to fill the Superdome every day. So it's an incredible amount of water. And as we heard today, when you inject the water at a rapid pace, it really influxes into the pore spaces and causes these seismic events. So we've been monitoring that, and the problem we're having in Texas and elsewhere, we have shallow injection sites, and then we have deeper injection sites. Shallow injection sites are susceptible to older wells. Some of these wells that have been abandoned and solidified back in the day have been 50 plus years, and so they're very weak. So when we inject into the shallow, that's a big problem, is having actual expulsion back onto the ground. The deeper ones is what we've been mapping out with the earthquakes. One of the issues we're having in Texas is really just the reporting efforts. And so there's a lot of requirements that the operators are to do when there's an event. But I need to make sure that everybody understands that there's not one well that causes an earthquake anywhere we go. It's typically a cluster, and it's understanding what the sponge of the earth is doing and knowing that it is a combination of many wells within a region that causes these earthquakes. And it's when we hit that capacity is when we see that. Now, often that can be the straw that broke the camel's back, but it's also leading up to that. So we've actually developed technology to map these efforts, to put all the data in, and we're using AI technology to actually understand the flow rates, pump pressures, and volumes, looking at that as a forensics example. So we've actually built that from 2016 up to 2024, and we're training the model. The issue we're having is getting data. And I have to just say that Mr. Bucky, who is in Highland, Texas, grew up in Highland, Texas, that my kids did, and he owns a saltwater disposal company. I don't think that Mr. Bucky is going to be very free to give all of his data to the state, especially if there's an issue when might be with one of his wells, or at least in the cluster of where we see an earthquake. So our premise is to put that behind a secure firewall in a subscription-based service, and have everybody bring that in and participate. That way we can have those data, build the model, and everybody would have access to the model while keeping everybody's data secure. And I would offer, as we build that we would be able to share that with the state representatives to understand what we're seeing in terms of these monitoring. And using the technology, I could say that we could map out where the earthquakes are occurring, and also with a predictive measure as well.
Is that basically for proprietary reasons? Mr. Bucky would not want to reveal any information?
Yeah, it's for proprietary, and then also if there was an earthquake within the region, and if all of his data is there ready for somebody to examine, it could be brought back to seeing, oh, it was your well that caused the earthquake, where that's not necessarily true if we look at it from a whole interaction of many wells together.
Mr. Bucky, I thought he was the guy to open up the travel stops.
Yeah,
along
no,
Interstate
it's
10.
not him.
Is this a real person?
It is,
Okay.
yes.
Look, we're not trying to get to anyone's information, but there is valuable information to be extracted from that. So if the state started moving in that direction, that would certainly be a consideration. Thank you for your testimony. Would you introduce yourself for the record? Thank you.
I have nothing to really add to it except to say that we met Bill Berger at
What's your name?
Kim Voorhees
And who do you
Goodell.
represent?
Myself.
Okay.
Yes. We met Bill Berger at the Produce Water Summit, the 35th annual one, a couple of months ago, and he was speaking about the use of the AI, but what brought me to be sure that he addressed your group was his spirit of cooperation, spirit of collaboration that industry needs to take on, and also with regard to how we build out our policies with regard to siting. We're looking at a lot of injection wells. We're looking at a lot of potential CO2 wells, pipelines, infrastructure. We know we have a subsurface that is not stagnant. It's dynamic, and his the geoscience that he puts together that is used to help make these siting decisions, I think, is invaluable to where we are today. And I just wanted to be sure that he had an opportunity to address all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. That's some good information. Yeah, as we continue moving forward, there is, we've got all types of injection wells. We've got CCS happening. So again, in the interest of making sure that all is safe, we can continue with economic development. That's good to know. And so I'm sure this committee and myself will keep you in the loop and maybe calling you from time to time just for some helpful hinters and some good pointers. Thank you for your testimony. And overall, I do think we do need more monitoring as we continue moving forward. I don't think more information is bad, and I don't think we can have too much information.
Of course.
And if I could make one plug for Bill Berger to be added to or considered there's 2 task forces that are being recently put together here in Louisiana to address these concerns.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. That's going to wrap up testimony for this part.